Okay, so let's look at a problem that we have. When I want to print a student, I have to do 3 couts. Cout get ID, cout get major, and cout get name. I want a way whereby when I print a student, the compiler knows to print the name, the ID, and the major without my having to explicitly tell it using 3 couts to do so. So let's fix this. Let's create a method to do our printing for us. So I will go to student.h and I will come here and I will say output, and I will create my method to be called toString. Okay, that's a name I want, toString. And this method will simply return something that cout can print, and so it will return a string. Okay, so cout will print strings, so we need to make sure we provide a string. So this is my method. When I call it on Jane or John, it should be able to print Jane or John's information in one step. So let's move over to step 2, student.cpp, and let's implement this. So the string will return a formatted student. Okay, and let's implement it. So we know we need to return a string. It's of the student class, and the method is toString. Okay, so let's create this student. So what I want to do, I want to create a string called let's say name, and this string will contain name. So we're gonna say student. In fact, we don't need to do that because we already have student name available to us. So let's just create a string that has those pieces. So string result is student name. Okay, plus I want to put a space. Let's put a space. Let's put a comma. Yeah, and a space. Then I want to have the student's ID. So student ID. Okay. Then I want to add to that another comma and a space. And then I want to put the student's major. Okay. And then I want to return that. So return result. You know, maybe I should put a parenthesis. Let's put a square bracket. So I'm going to put a square bracket. Okay. And then I'm going to close with a square bracket. Okay, so plus a square bracket. Okay, so that's how I want a student to be printed. So when I print a student, I should have a square bracket, the student name, a comma, the student ID, a comma, and then the student major. Okay, so let's save that. Let's go to step 3, which is to test it in main. So I will get rid of all of this. Okay, all of this. So let's remove this. So that's the setter. Okay, so well, let's change the getter. Let's print John's details. So instead of having to do cout, 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 I will simply say cout John dot to string. Okay, and end line. Okay, that's it. And then I change John's things. So here I will simply say cout John dot to string. Okay, and then here I change Jane's major, so I will say cout Jane dot to string. Okay. Okay. So what I expect to see is that end line. Even though it's one line, one cout, I should see a complete picture of John. Okay, so if I click play, okay, so you notice I get John Smith, the ID, and the major. Then I made a change, so it's now Peter Smith, different ID, different major. And then I made a change to Jane, and so we can see that Jane is now doing CS. So notice I have specified that this is how I want my students to be printed. So when the compiler sees that, oh, okay, I need to print a student, well, that student will be printed based on how I have specified. Okay. All right, so let's go back to our student.h. And there's one thing that you need to be mindful of. We can have multiple, and I'll say that again, we can have multiple constructors, meaning there are many ways that we can create a student, okay? And so if you want for your student to be created in different ways, you can do that. For example, let's say you want to give your users the ability to create a student without providing the name, the SID, the ID, or the major. You can do that. So you can create a new constructor, right? Also called student, and it will be empty. Okay? And that's a constructor. So the compiler will notice that you can create a student without anything. So let's implement this. So we'll go to step 2 and we will create a empty student. So I will come here. Okay. And so I will simply say student colon student. Okay. And so what do you want to do if nothing is provided for the student? Well, a good approach is to create some initial values. So set some initial values. Okay. And so what I'm going to do, if a student is created without any name or SID or major, all I'm going to do is to say that the student name will be blank. The student ID will be blank. And the student major will be, let's say, undecided. Okay. Or, if you wanted, blank. Okay. So I have created a new constructor where somebody can create a student without having to provide these 3 things. Okay. And so I could save this, and then to show you that it works, I could go to main and I could create a new student. And so I could say student Joe. That's it. No parentheses. No parentheses are needed. No parentheses are needed. That's something you must keep in mind when you're creating a new student, but it's without any parameters, then we just leave them off. Okay, so we're going to call this our default constructor. Okay, notice it looks just like how you would do something with like creating a string or creating some other built-in variable. All right, so keep that in mind. Only if you're providing something with the constructor do you use the parentheses. If there's nothing being provided, you do not include the parentheses. So this is Joe, and we could easily print out Joe. So we could say cout Joe.toString. And of course, we expect that nothing will be printed for Joe. Okay, and indeed, notice empty, empty. Nothing is provided for Joe, so nothing is printed. So this is how you create a constructor. Now, you can create a constructor also where you could say, I will create a constructor where the only thing you need to provide when you are creating a student is their major. Okay, or the only thing you need to provide for a student is their name, or the only thing you need to provide for a student is their ID. All right, so it's completely up to you how many and what kind of constructors you want to create for your class. Okay, so I could easily do that. I could say, you know what, just provide one thing for me, and that is the name. Okay, that's all I need you to provide. That's it. And then I will do the rest. What I will do, I will simply, let me copy and paste this. I will simply say, okay, string name. I will set name to what you give me. And the other two, I will leave them blank. Okay, so this is how I can create a constructor that only needs the name. And so if I come back to main, I could create a new constructor called Pepe or Paul. And this constructor will take a name, say Paul Thomas. That's all it needs. And so if I say cout Paul dot to string, okay, we will see that we will only get back Paul's name, but the other things will be missing because they were set to the empty string. All right, so that's it. That's all you really need to know for classes. The rest is simply getting practice building more classes. That's it, building more classes. But the steps remain the same. You must always start with declaring the class to the compiler, declaring what constructors you can use, declaring the getters, if there are any, declaring the setters, if there are any, of course, declaring a way to output the class objects, and of course, we must always have private variables that will allow us to store what we need to store about the object. In this case, for every object that is created, we need to know its name, its ID, and its major. All right, I'll leave it here, and I will see you in the upcoming lessons in our C++ course.